Good morning, and thank you for joining 3 Actions Retailers Must Take to Optimize Merchandising in a Post-ish COVID World with Tom Erskine, CEO of One Door. As a reminder, if you have any questions during the conversation, to please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Now here's your host, Deborah Weinswig, CEO and founder of Coresight Research.
Thanks so much, Mara. I'm very excited to be here today with Tom to explore the 3 most important actions retailers can take to drive real-time insights and centralized communication in their merchandising execution, which I think we can all agree is incredibly important right now. As we look at these kind of 3 important actions, we've kind of boiled them down into number 1, unleashing the true potential of AI through a continuous feedback loop, really kind of across integrated planning. Number 2, achieving integration maturity by investing in technologies that can plug into existing systems, all that much better, to reap the benefits of faster implementation. And then number 3, using objective-based investment tracking to identify and address lagging processes that negatively impact ROI, which, once again, I think is something that we're all talking about, kind of a bit more now. So if we look at the agenda for today, we just at least highlighted some of those actions. We'll talk about managing merchandising execution and, kind of a pre and kind of post-ish, some of the rising challenges, merchandising processes and how they lack integration. I think we've all experienced that. And then really kind of going through some of our key insights and recommendations. And so, I always like to start with the data and kind of draw insights from that. And, kind of, Tom, as we look at this, right, the survey data reveals around 2/3 of all respondents have either increased or invested the same amount on in-store merchandising than before over the past 12 months. And the focus of retailers should not just be on investing in latest tech, but at the same time, focus on its integration across merchandising and planning processes, which can really help in achieving customer centricity in merchandising. As we think about that, Tom, and kind of based on the 3 actions we cite for retailers for achieving merchandising agility, where do you see retailers struggling the most in achieving, this agility based on your, longer term experience and also recent experience?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, good morning, everybody, and good morning, Deb. It's great to be here. Always love doing these with you.
Thank you.
So when we look out in the market, where we see the most challenges today still is around a couple of areas. The first is there's still a ton of silos in retail, and even within this process, it's tend to be a fair amount of sort of execution gaps, if you want to call it, in the process and in the chain that prevent retailers from working effectively to reduce the life cycle of time associated with merchandising. And then the second is that retailers still struggle in the last mile. So in the last mile, what I mean by that is sort of the last 100 feet to the shelf in the store. So even as they make relatively significant investments in HQ technologies, AI, et cetera, a lot of times what they find is that those investments get wasted because the processes, as you get closer to the shelf and as you get further toward the stores, processes tend to break down, become harder to implement consistently and effectively, et cetera. And so, it presents almost like an asymmetrical problem where you have a whole lot of investment going on the HQ side, but then if you don't follow that up, if your investment's kind of asymmetrical, you don't follow that up in the stores, it tends to you tend to lose the value that you were trying to create.
I mean, I think the number 3 here is really interesting because this challenge around the ROI on the spend, which is something I've heard throughout, kind of grocery and, kind of fashion as well, is how does, whether you're kind of at the CMO level or whatnot, how do you kind of justify and then, kind of report back in terms of the impact that some of these technologies have had?
Yeah, it's a great question. And obviously as a software vendor, we spend a lot of time working with prospects and our sponsors inside of our customers, helping them. And for us, there are really 3 big drivers of ROI that we see our customers focus on and that we actually end up counseling everybody that we work with to focus on. And the first one is nice because it's really easy. And that is that there is just a there's a meaningful benefit here associated with simplifying work for store teams. And it's very, it's sort of an easy ROI to take to the bank because it's literally just the time savings. And it's something that jumps right out at you. But then the second and frankly larger and more meaningful ROIs are around sort of lift, and whether that's promotional lift related to campaigns or whether that's just overall sales lift because products are on the shelves and you're avoiding out of stocks and things like that. Those are frankly harder to measure. And that's where a lot of these feedback loops that we're talking about using AI come into play. But they are massive and they are meaningful. Obviously, it's just intuitive that if a product is where it's supposed to be in a store, sales will go up. But it's amazing how that intuition gets lost sometimes in the shuffle. And, there is good hard data that shows a reduction in either out of stock or just frankly an improvement in the quality of overall merchandising. Does wonders. And one thing I want to point out here is that the other thing we talk a little bit about with our prospects and clients is this idea of day zero compliance, which is that when you think about things like promotions and you think about the marketing and advertising spend that goes behind promotions, that spend starts on day zero. And if the product isn't set properly and if the promotions aren't set properly on day zero, then there's a lot of advertising and marketing dollars being lit on fire that are not being spent effectively and not going to be able to meaningfully drive lift in those campaigns. And so, when we talk about merchandising agility, I think a big part of that for us is this idea of day zero compliance and being able to get a product set right as soon as it's supposed to be versus a week later when somebody gets around to it.
I have so many questions, and I know we have a lot to get through, but sometimes the store level interpretation of a campaign or whatnot may be different than the kind of vendors, what they originally intended. And I know that, kind of through your platform, there's the ability to kind of take a photo and upload it in terms of how everything was kind of laid out and interpreted. Can you talk about, is there, kind of through OneDoor, is there an opportunity to just kind of make sure that everything that was intended is interpreted correctly at the store level? And if not, how is that kind of handled in real time?
Yeah, so the answer is absolutely. And I think that, with our platform, there is, we use photos. We use the taking of a photograph. Photos are, pictures worth 1,000 words, right? So we have a feature of the platform called Store Gallery that enables everybody involved in the process to be able to see in real time exactly what a shelf looks like. And we increasingly use technologies like AI to help identify the state of that photograph, to help sort of prevent teams from having to sift through millions of photos live. But what we are finding, though, is that with an increasing spend at headquarters and improvements in AI, one thing you mentioned up front there is that a lot of times stores do sort of interpretations. We are seeing, frankly, a reduction in what we would consider kind of store autonomy. And we're going toward, I think, as an industry, a more prescriptive approach to merchandising, where, headquarters has a very clear vision for what stores should look like. And the best thing that can happen is that store executes, and that there is less autonomy on behalf of a store team to sort of decide what to do. There are obviously exceptions to that. Supply chain disruptions are a great example, where stores may need to make on-the-fly substitutions. But in most cases, especially with promotions, one of the benefits of the platform is the ability to create for every single store an exact description of exactly what you want that particular store to look like. So there shouldn't have to be any guessing. There shouldn't be, and that is sort of, unfortunately, one of the things that happens in legacy situations in the industry today is because every store is slightly different, in terms of layout, potentially. Stores are left to make decisions on their own. And what we like to be able to do and do in our platform is give every store exactly what it needs based on its exact specifications.
Which is incredibly interesting. So basically each store is mapped, each, whether it's 4 feet, 8, 12, whatnot, so that, those at the store level, right, everyone's kind of speaking the same language. I mean, it's really impressive. And then so let's say if I'm in store 1 and I'm, kind of doing this set and I have some questions, how do I kind of, reach out, if you will, or how do I utilize the platform to help me kind of, gain intelligence, and whether it's reaching out to other stores or just even, is the intelligence that I need easily served up? And what if I need assistance or help?
Yeah. So the loop to make this work in real life, which is what we've spent the last, 20 something years trying to figure out how to do. But to make this work in real life, the feedback loop's got to be two-way, and it's got to be real time, right? So I have to be able to, as headquarters, I've got to be able to communicate to the stores what I want. But then the stores need to be able to provide meaningful feedback back to me at HQ. And, that can be in the form of, I didn't get what I needed. That can be in the form of, look, hey, this is a recommendation I have. That can be in the form of just, hey, here's the work we did and here's how we did it and why. But, the platform and ours, and look, there are other platforms, but this entire breed of solution, this category, and our sort of the merchandising software category, it broadly has to evolve to a point where that feedback loop is real time and closed. And so that, when work is done in store, that work is then fed back into making better decisions for the future. And our platform enables that. There are others that do as well. We obviously we've got a predisposition to our own.
Yeah, it's interesting as we, kind of look at the slide around, kind of some of the increased difficulties in managing merchandising execution now versus, let's say, in 2019. I think that certainly kind of store personnel and kind of, assuming that, we've got a lot of kind of new talent in our organization, how do we think about kind of training, and then what's also kind of driving some of these increased challenges?
Yeah, so I'll start with the challenges because I think it's easy to put it into really 3 broad categories. The first is labor, which is just simply that store labor is harder to come by. It is, I don't think it's any secret. Store teams are under more pressure than they've ever been under. The second thing is the role of the store associate has changed dramatically. Store associates are now, in addition to their old responsibilities, as the role of the store changes to take into consideration so much of what's happening with various forms of fulfillment, whether that's curbside or in-store or whatever it is. There's a whole picking component that's going on now that's taking up a significant amount of store associate time around picking products for orders, et cetera. So stores are sort of becoming almost quasi-fulfillment centers at the same time as they are sales floors. So that hybrid store environment changes things. Not only for the associate, but also for the merchandising strategies. And then there are supply chain issues that are driving this. And then the last thing I'd point to, which is actually a significant one that we've seen a number of our retailer customers wrestle with over the last 24 months, or I guess 20 months, is this sort of idea of COVID, especially here in the States, the response to COVID is a regional response or a state-based response. And it drives real differences on a per store basis in terms of what stores are open, how are they open, are they fully open, et cetera. And unfortunately, we see that continuing here for a little while. And that obviously, requires a ton of agility in merchandising, because you all of a sudden have to make very big decisions about what's going to what stores and how stores should be merchandised, depending on whether they're fully opened or not.
Yeah, you brought up something that I've actually spent a shocking amount of time thinking about, which is if your stores are almost kind of purpose-built for BOPUS curbside pickup versus if they're kind of purpose-built mainly for, kind of the consumer to do the shop themselves. As we think about layout and, kind of this whole topic around merchandising execution, what are you seeing in terms of some of the changes? And how can technology, right, even, if you're looking at kind of the percentage of sales as they're changing in terms of how the consumer is kind of, if you will, acquiring the merchandise, how is that all kind of coming together to, kind of impact, change, the merchandising execution?
I think the biggest difference is that the sort of requirements for how stores were merchandised or how products were accounted for in a store is changing dramatically, which is that in the old days, the back room was the back room and the sales floor was the sales floor. And you wanted a very high-end, nice merchandising presentation on the sales floor, but the back room was just the back room and you could pretty much put stuff wherever you wanted. What we are seeing now is retailers shifting significantly to want to use technologies like ours to more effectively, frankly, merchandise the back room.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So that products are, so that the location of a particular SKU can be identified at a moment's notice for a store associate that needs to fulfill it. And it sort of ups the ante for knowing where everything in a store is. And it's significantly changing the requirements. So I guess the bottom line is sort of, again, that the line between the sales floor and the back room is blurring significantly here.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, it's massive. And we literally, it's cool because it's something where it's theoretically it makes sense, but then in our conversations with our customers every day, we see this and we hear this from them, which is, hey, we need to start, for instance, merchandising these fixtures, and these aren't fixtures that are out on the sales floor. These are fixtures in the back room, and we have to do it because customers we need a very granular understanding of where these products are.
Well, it's interesting. We work with a lot of the REITs, and I know that, right, they're trying to provide inspiration and whatnot to their tenants. And I think this in particular has been a real challenge because, and it can, depend on time of year. It can depend on, the news in terms of how consumers are actually kind of shopping the physical store. So how do you kind of flex quickly, right? And, I think that, so maybe as you've seen this, right, from like a merchandising execution side, how are these companies able to kind of be so agile?
Yeah, so I think that the agility is, again, a big part of the agility is driven by being able to communicate in real time out to the field. Again, it's, becoming more agile at HQ isn't necessarily that much of a challenge. You're taking a team of 100 people involved in an HQ merchandising process and accelerating the ability at which they make decisions. That's not hard. I think what's hard is then turning around and implementing those decisions across thousands of stores with tens of thousands of store associates. That's where the challenge lies. And I think that's where the organizations that are becoming more agile are able to do that effectively because they are communicating effectively in real time with those teams in the field and collecting whatever feedback it is they need from those field teams to make better decisions at HQ. And to some extent, starting to use AI, as we described, starting to use AI as a meaningful part of the process. One, in doing a better job of managing the compliance, sort of, understanding what's compliant and what's not through things like computer vision. And then the second is using AI in the assortment and sort of category management process, generally more as an HQ. And that's not something we generally get that involved in, the upstream assortment optimization processes. But certainly there's a ton of AI now coming to the fore and being used in that process as well.
What are some of the, if we think about, right, we've all been through this kind of, change in how we execute and how we engage with others in our organizations. What do you think from a retail perspective, what do you think kind of sticks, and what are the key learnings for retail merchandisers, kind of to act upon, it's all about, right, simplifying, right? I think that we've all learned, right, the more simple, kind of the better ability to execute. What do you think that, the key takeaways end up being?
Well, I think for us, the key that it can't, it was amazing to work with one large client we worked with where they took simplicity for the stores to a leadership level. That was essentially a leadership level strategic initiative for them, was simplifying work for store teams. And I think there's something to be said for clarity of vision around simplicity at that level to really effectively strategically drive change into their organization. And it was I think, in this case, very effectively. I think the other changes that will stick are clearly what COVID has done. And I think I think we've all seen this, that it's probably best to view what we've experienced with COVID not as some type of one-time sort of anomaly, but as in fact just a compression of 10 to 15 years of digital transformation in retail into a period of 20 months. Because that's really what's happened, right? Is everybody, it went from being kind of this nagging thing to being an existential threat. And so, okay, once it's an existential threat, we're going to deal with it. And so the digitization or digitalization of the link between HQ and stores is here to stay. And so I think for us, one of the things that we're very thankful for is that the thing that ends up sticking is that no one's going backward in terms of transforming the communication mechanism between HQ and stores to a completely digital one, where there's no more sort of all these processes now are highly digitalized, and that affords the ability to implement tools like AI, the ability to personalize down to the store level like we do, et cetera. And so I think the big thing that sticks here, big picture, the thing that sticks is just that nobody's shipping binders to stores anymore. Seriously. I mean, look, I was in a Starbucks a few months ago, and not to pick on Starbucks. I should have said I was in a coffee shop 2 months ago, and there was a woman. She was resetting the shelving with a binder. So I think I think we're seeing now move toward digitalization, and no one's gone back.
So what do you think that means in terms of, I think that the data from our survey indicated that, we've seen for obvious reasons, a significant increase in budget allocated to technology at grocery. I think over 50% of respondents from the grocery sector, kind of cited, a big focus on in-store merchandising technology, and, it was a little less, I think 29% for drugstores, but which all makes sense in terms of where we're at with things. But how do you see the teams changing? And with this technology, Tom, what skills are needed kind of today? And do these organizations need more or less in terms of people, or is it just different skill sets, or is it kind of, ceteris paribus, is it all the same? Now we just have this kind of like rocket fuel to take us to a different place.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I actually don't have a ton of I would say that we haven't, that in stores where the team is the biggest in the stores. So let me sort of start there, right? Just again, in order of magnitude, you're talking about thousands of store associates versus potentially hundreds or tens of people at HQ in this whole overall merchandising process. I don't think it's a question of the store team function or the store skill set changing dramatically. But what I do think it is it's a the people working in stores were all Gen Z, and they were all Gen Z anyway, and now you're just doing a better job of matching the technology that they're using to the technology that they're comfortable with. So I don't think it's a question of I don't think you need different skill sets in stores. I think you need different technology in the stores to support the skill sets that were already there. And I think that's what's happening here. And I think that's the meaningful thing. And it isn't reskilling the store labor. It's putting better tools in the hands of the skills that were already in place.
Like catching up to them almost, right? I mean, it's
totally. Come on. I mean, seriously, just imagine imagine you're an 18-year-old store associate at a retailer, and you're being asked to perform. I mean, God Almighty, you're being asked to perform these processes using these, unbelievably dinosaur-like tools. It's just crazy.
No, it is interesting if you think about it in terms of, maybe, I mean, I would assume or juxtapose that, right? We could see less turnover, greater engagement, right? There's like a gamification element, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we got to take, and I think the gamification, and then the last piece is, again, I think AI can play a huge part in this, which is that in one of the areas where we're super excited about going and pushing our platform in the future is store associates are forced to make decisions every day. And regardless of, even when we put our technology in their hands, they're still being asked to make decisions today. And they still have more work on their plate to do every day than they have time to accomplish. And I think we believe that there's an incredible amount of upside to helping them make better decisions about what it is that they can do that drive the business the best in the store that no technologies are really assisting them with today. And so whether it's helping them arbitrate, they've got 5 different tasks that they need to do, and they're trying to arbitrate between those 5, whether it's helping them make the best decision about which one's the most important, or it's there's a product out of stock and they don't have the inventory in store to fill it, and they're trying to figure out what the right substitution decision is. There are a bunch of decisions that they make every day that we can help with this type of technology. But the first thing we've got to do is we've got to get the base automation in place. So we sort of think of it in 3 levels. We sort of think of base digitalization as just sort of getting the pipes and the plumbing hooked up so you can communicate effectively. And then the second is automating where you can automate. And then the third is using AI to help them make better decisions. And we see most of our customers working with us kind of in that order.
It's an interesting thought. I mean, as we think about the kind of efficiency and where we need the upgrade, I mean, this idea around compliance with, kind of merchandising instructions. I mean, I've seen that for years. And when you think about, right, what vendors are paying for, right, it's certainly mission critical that we kind of, deliver as retailers what we said we would. And there's a really great question that we got from Russell, which is, how do you validate compliance timing to requested merchandise actions?
Yeah, so again, the great thing there is that the platform spits out a ton of data with regards to when actions were completed. So when a shelf was set, is it still up to date? And we use photos, and as I said, increasingly using AI and computer vision to analyze photos to identify the compliance of the photo. So, that provides to the retailer. We generally work with the retailers directly, providing all that data back to the retailer. And then I think longer term, there's obviously a question with regards to the relationship retailers have with their vendor partners around compliance and how that gets shared, et cetera. And whether or not retailers can help their vendor partners prevent having to spend millions of dollars on expensive third-party merchandising compliance audits. If the data is there and it's trustable, then why do we need the third party? Is certainly a question. And I think that what we're able to provide in the platform is very effective the ability to very effectively validate compliance right away. At the moment that the fixture is set the first time, versus waiting a week or 10 days or however long it takes usually.
Well, I think the efficiency is key. We've got a question that came in from Kevin. How can retailers best overcome the challenges posed by individual teams resisting integration and change across departments? Good one.
Yeah, it is a good one. I think, I've been doing enterprise software for a long time, and a lot of it was in the contact center space or the CRM space. And we used to run into this challenge all the time, which is that, when you implement something like that, there tends to be a lot of times this kind of, oh boy, here they come again from headquarters with another tool that's going to help us, and tends to be a fair amount of field skepticism, et cetera. I would say that I think that what we've recognized is that if the platform actually really helps the person do their job, that there generally isn't much of a resistance to it. What tends to happen is, I think a lot of times if people at headquarters don't do a good job of identifying what it is that the teams in the field really need in order to do their job better, that's when problems arise. And I think in our case, we see really high engagement levels. So what we're happy to see in our platform is when we implement it, you see sort of 90 to 90+% engagement levels, meaning that the teams in the field are using it to do the job every time they do the job. And that's a really good sign, and a sign that the technology is being adopted and embraced, as opposed to just sort of, well, I'm going to use it, but that's only because they're telling me I have to.
It's interesting you bring up, because there's actually a question related to this, which is, kind of what other technologies do you integrate with? And, do you integrate with anything on a kind of task management or tasking system side?
Yeah. Speaking of technologies that people in the field don't like very much. So yes, the answer is task management systems, companies like Reflexis, or BPM systems, companies like Pega, et cetera. We integrate with those. A lot of times what those platforms are doing is they're sort of telling somebody what to do. And our system is really telling them how to do it. And so I think we don't mind, we're sort of happy to play that role. And if there's a system in place around scheduling, et cetera, we integrate to that too. With one of our customers, for example, we import all their labor planning information, so that when we're sending out, when merchandising execution and merchandising is being sent to stores, all the labor planning is already baked in. So they've already estimated how long it's going to take, et cetera, and that's incorporated into the work that we're sending out. But yeah, we like any SaaS platform, integration to other systems is a critical part of what we do.
It's a really interesting idea, which is right on the training side, right? Because there's got to be ways that, throughout the organization, some associates have figured out ways to save time and whatnot. And if we think about that, how does that kind of all integrate? And right, if somebody's challenged, right, like how does the system help them, whether it's like AI driven or not? Right, I see someone else is taking them 3 minutes, it's taking me 12. Like, what can I learn from that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that a couple things. One is that another area where we can go, we haven't done as much as we want to, honestly, but there's a ton of opportunity here around crowdsourcing answers and the ability to use other, for people across stores to lean on each other as resources to help them. And we're starting to do some of that. We can do more. And then the second thing is just sort of a general observation with regards to enterprise software. But, when we implement the system across a retailer, we recognize that in the stores that there's a variety of skill levels and experience levels. And in general, I think our guidance to our customer base is generally, imagine that you believe in your stores, you have a series of people, and that you can group them into cohorts, and you got a bunch of A players and you got a bunch of B players and a bunch of C players in terms of skill level. Very often we're not really trying to turn the A players into A plus players. They're already A players. In many ways, what we're trying to do is to build the software in a way that it just doesn't get in their way, and that it still enables them to do their A job the way they've been doing it. What we're really trying to do is we're trying to turn the C players into A players, or the C players into B players. And by doing that, we're trying to improve the performance of the entire group. But really what we're targeting is getting those lower performers to a place where they're performing just as well as the A players. And so the software is designed to try and balance not getting in the way of the good people, but at the same time improving the performance of the people that aren't quite as good. And I think when we take that approach, we do really, really well. And it works very, very well in the stores.
We got a question from Martha. How much granularity do you think retailers need in data when looking at complex metrics such as ROI? How to draw a strong correlation in investments and the impact?
Well, I guess I don't, the question of granularity, I mean, I think we're able to show, again, very strong ROI across sort of the three different basic areas that we described. Cost, compliance obviously drives sales lift. And to some extent, you can even, promo lift, sales lift in a related way. I'm not as clear on the question as it relates to overall to granularity, I guess. I would just say that I think what we would coach is generally keeping the ROI as simple as possible. And in some cases, even, with a lot of our customers, what we end up doing is starting we'll start with a particular brand and show how we can drive an ROI in a particular brand across a particular, part of the store, in some cases, center of store, et cetera. But then pretty quickly, you start to get a much broader vision for how this can apply across the entire footprint.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting as we kind of look at this idea around, we see many retailers with custom applications, and then the challenges around kind of, keeping those updated, having them kind of connect with each other into kind of a bigger ERP platform. I mean, from a one-door perspective, when we've seen, historically, there's this idea of custom build versus, kind of utilizing maybe more off the shelf. I feel like going back to what we've learned over the past 20, 22 months is this idea that, we need to move very quickly, and that, kind of working with somebody like a One Door is a way to do that. How do you help, kind of retailers think about kind of this custom built versus, kind of utilizing a SaaS platform like One Door?
Yeah, good question. I think we've seen, we've had a couple of implementations, frankly, recently, where they have been moving away from their own internally built platform and coming over to use a product. I think a lot of it, obviously some of it comes down to just overall philosophy, retailer philosophy. Some retailers believe that that's the way to do things. Others don't. I think that what's happening now is, I think this space, this overall solution space, where maybe 5 years ago, the platform or productized technology wasn't as evolved. I think as the productized technology evolves, the argument for building it yourself probably declines somewhat, because there are vendors like One Door and others with mature solutions in this space that have a pretty robust set of capabilities and a fair amount of R&D investment behind them to support R&D going forward. One of the big challenges with internally developed platforms is it's never meeting the requirements today. It's always meeting the requirements in 24, 48, 72 months. And so I think with our platform, I think what we're beginning to see with ours and others is real momentum behind a solution category here that is a full-blown SaaS solution category that probably makes it, will probably shift the decision-making process. I mean, I don't know if anybody's building their own CRM systems these days, but I'm guessing the answer is probably no.
Fewer. I think there always is this idea, right? Because we know the company better, right? We're looking from the inside out. So I do think that as we're seeing kind of speed as the new oil, if you will, I think that there is this kind of aspect around how to think differently about SaaS solutions. And actually, we have a question from Eric. And I will say in some way, shape, or form, I've been getting this particular question almost every day. So Eric says, what, in your opinion, is the best approach to integrate AI? Can you share the functionality of the One-Door platform in the context of integration and its time to market?
Wow, so that's a lot. Let's start with functionally. Let me break that down a little. Let me start with functionally. Where does AI make maybe the most sense? So I think that the areas where we're focused on, again, and this is us, the areas where we're focused on related to AI are helping different users in the platform make better decisions based on the underlying data. So that's probably, in our case, there are two very clear use cases. The first is the store team, helping the store team make better decisions about what work they're going to accomplish. And the second is with planners at HQ and helping surface data and decisions to the planner that can help the planner potentially make better merchandising decisions. So, for example, surfacing a planogram to them and showing them performance of that planogram and showing them recommendations for how that planogram can be adapted is an example of how AI can be integrated. In terms of, I think the next question was more just about general integration.
That's the one it's interesting. We've been getting that's kind of the shape of the question we've been getting. And also too, right? Where do these companies start, right? If they're new to kind of an AI, based SaaS solution, how do they get started? Kind of how does that work throughout the organization? What kind of teams do they need to support it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, right. Yeah. I think that we have, the way we work with most of our customers is that when we implement the solution, we are supporting them from both an account and even potentially from a services perspective in a way that enables them to get started without having to worry about a ton of process change inside their organizations. But frankly, we're working mostly with tier one retailers. These are tier one retailers that have already made pretty significant investments in data analysis, data science, AI, and those functions. And so what we're doing is trying to make sure that we're providing the integrations and the openness to their ecosystems so that we can fit into the evolution in their their overall business evolution that they already have underway. So I think in many cases, our perspective on that question may be a little different than some other vendors that might be working with sort of primarily smaller retailers with less resources, et cetera.
That's really helpful. And I can't believe we're it's like time to wrap things up, but we've got this conclusion. So which I actually think is really quite interesting, because if we start to break it down and we think about, going back to Tom's comments, right, how to kind of effectively leverage AI and, helping retailers, if we just kind of get started right with compliance and efficiency, right, this will drive better execution. And then I do think the second point, anything that can be done right now to have, give the Gen Z the technology that they're used to using every day. And if that can drive, if you will, lower turnover, greater engagement, I mean, that is to me like table stakes. I mean, hey, right now, the more that we can simplify, I think, kind of process and procedure, then we can do it better. And certainly, as Tom said, right, if the product's not on the shelf, it is challenging to purchase it. And so I think that is, kind of mission critical. Speed, agility, I mean, that is, I think, been the oil for the last 22 months. And then I think that this real key, I mean, we got a few questions around just kind of like ROI and the measurement. And I do think that, these kind of wins with, a company like a One Door and how retailers can approach this, and then, right, they can measure it, right? So not only can they, talk about it internally and get additional, I would say, support, but also externally as well with, kind of whether it's shareholders or other stakeholders. So Tom, this is like a whistle-stop tour. Thank you so much. I feel like there's still so much to discuss. Enjoy the rest of your day, and everyone, thanks for joining us, and thanks for all the great questions. We appreciate it.
Deb, always a pleasure. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.